Wishing everybody a happy Purim. We're Mesilat Yesharim. We're going to finish up chapter 15. And it says over here a very important thing, gentlemen. And that is that we have to be aware that Judaism is a lot of times mind over matter, right? You know, a mind, using our common sense and thinking deeply and not superficially like so many people do, is will make a world of a difference. And one of my friends loved, for example, a lot of people when they fail, they get miserable and they get depressed and they get anxious and they, sometimes go crazy. But FAIL is the acronym for find the actual inner lesson, which means when you don't live a shallow life, when you actually use your brains and the Torah, right? It's like listen, we need a lot of power to overcome the Yetzer Hara. He's one tough cookie. He's the biggest of giants like Yeravam ben Nevat and even Shaul HaMelech, the biggest of the big. Even David HaMelech, he's our Mashiach, but he was unfortunately did what he did with Bathsheba. So what we need to do is hitbonenut. You understand? Live a life of truth and think very deeply and deliberately. You understand? Because when the Satan is very cunning, right? You have to beat him at his own game, but you also, when you don't think of the consequences of your actions and you just do things in a rushy, angry, shallow, thoughtlessness, like Reuven, the firstborn of Yaakov, lost everything. He was supposed to be the king. He was supposed to be the firstborn, get double portion, He was supposed to be the Kohen. He lost everything because he went and messed up his dad's bedroom. So, like we say in Farsi, Ajale kare sheytune. So he says, he says you're going to get out of prison when you actually go think deeper, right? We live in such a shallow society where people everything is based on the external, What we learn from the Megillah is the true beauty. Esther was not, according to a lot of opinions in Gemara, wasn't so beautiful. Her beautiful shine from inside her soul. So, when you act like a lawless glutton and eat like an animal, that's not high class. That's not how being godly and angelic is. That's not being part of the chosen nation of God. You understand? So you can start to internalize this, that treat food as medicine, right? Like the Rambam says, right? We eat. Do we live to eat or eat to live, right? When we treat food as medicine to help us be the best servants of Hashem, not for selfishness, right? You know that this is the way the Rav Volbe brings from the Rebbe of the Arizal, the Ramak. That's the bottom line, how to differentiate where you're going towards the side of the Yetzer Hara or Yetzer Hatov. We Jews are allowed to, Purim is the most gashmiistic day of the year, right? We get so much gifts, but if you're doing it for the mitzvah, right, or the sake of your family, you're being metaken the Shechina for the sake of your wife, you get into gashmi, right? But then that's the Yetzer Tov, right? But when you when you treat food as poison, and when does food become poison? Or I'm sorry, sexual relation become poison? When
overdone.
Yeah. You know what the litmus test is? After that, are you closer to Hashem? Are you going? Because mitzvah goreret mitzvah, right? One mitzvah leads to another. But if it's leading you to become lazy and not be able to, like Ben Ishchai always brings this down. If it brings you to a state where you're not allowed to be in your spiritual, meditative, high elevated, high energy state, it's bogging you down. Then you're using your food as poison, right? Veloy pateh, don't get, he says, the Ramchal says, don't become tricked and seduced by the Yetzer Hara. It says, actually, it should be disgusting to you. Somebody that's a glutton and is eating and indulging twice as much as he needs. The common thing we need to keep on reviewing 101, perhaps 400 times, is a synonym for kedoshim is perushim, right? Holiness and abstinence are two sides of the same coin. Because a lot of things in our religion are very, unfortunately, ambiguous, you know? It's hard to define holiness. But there's a whole parsha called Parshas Kedoshim, right? Which has a lot of mitzvahs, has at least 50 practical mitzvahs in that parsha, the mitzvah of loving your neighbor as yourselves. So Rashi says one meaning of being holy is separation of sexes, right? Don't look at dirty stuff, other women that are not your wife, and don't think about it, don't talk about it, have a mechitza between. And another thing is, a deeper, more general umbrella thing is, kedoshim means perushim, to be abstinence, to put the brakes on having too much indulgence in this world. When you don't think, when you don't use your brain, and you're thoughtless and you rush, that's perhaps why Chachamim say make a bracha. And he says when your friends are all high rollers and riches that are like government officials or billionaires or these, jappy people, Jewish American princesses or princes, both male and female, and you're going to get sucked into them, right? It's very, peer pressure is something we cannot, if everybody's wearing a Gucci tie and Gucci watch and Gucci shoes, then unfortunately, like in LA, that people do I didn't know what to answer one of my star students.
In terms of what?
We went to a wedding. They spent probably close to $500,000. Hard to know. 300-400, $500,000. It's hard to know with inflation now. What? So when he asks me, Rabbi, why do you what's the difference between religious and not religious? The unreligious show off, spend almost tens of thousands of dollars on flowers, and the religious do. What am I supposed to answer him? What the Ramchal is saying is, if you want to be a Parush, hang around Prushim, go near Rabbi Netaneli. This is the overwhelming concept. If you do not understand this, I'm sorry, you're Amaretz. I don't know if you know as much Torah in your brain like an encyclopedia like Rav Chaim Kanievsky and Rav Avadia, but you weren't Mishamish Gedolim. You didn't go serve and observe and give a ride to and in any way hang around and associate yourself with Gedolei Yisrael, with the great Tzaddikim and Rosh Yeshivas, then everything you're learning is intellectual, is not practical. And you're still Am Haaretz in my book. I mean, the Chazal say that, Actions always speak greater than words. When you're in the presence of greatness and you see how they carry out the Torah, it's exactly like somebody that wants to learn to be a surgeon from a textbook. Can he learn it? Or does he need to do residency? He needs to be open up, Same thing, if you want to be a true Torah scholar and servant of God, see how actual leaders of our generation, the real leaders, the real deal, deals with their wife, deals with their kids, deals with their eating. Like, I tell you, my Rebbe, that is a true Gadol B'Yisrael, one of the future Gedolim of America, Reb Tzvi Berkowitz, I was asking, what's the bracha on sushi? He says, I never ate it. You see from that a world of Musar, that he's so parush, he's into the basics. So people that are living this extravagant life of access and having the Jewish version of caviar and champagne, and you think it's not going to affect you? You want to be a Parish, hang around the right crowd, Rosh Hashanah Zatzal said it's impossible to go in the mud and not get muddy. Same way, if all of your friends are these high rollers and these extremely materialistic people, then it's very hard for you to be a Parosh, right? Because you're going to get jealous, and that's just the nature of human beings. So the first pasuk in Tehillim is really telling us this, right? That happy is the worst person that doesn't hang around the wrong crowd. He says, even if you have extremely strong sense of self-identity, like Noach, but he says you're still in a danger zone. When your community and your social circle, is a bunch of people that are always addicted to the highest form of what? Excessive luxury and excessive fancy-mancy foods. And that's why Shlomo Melech ultimately says in Kohelet, I don't know how to say it, it's so complicated saying it in English, but Kohelet 7.
Ecclesiastes.
Yeah. It says it's always better to go to the house of the mourner than the wedding. Why? Because Achai Yiten Libo. Actually, the great, one of the great spreaders of Bitachon Torah, of trusting Hashem, I think Michael Safdie said that, he went to two extremely rich Syrian Jewish people's funeral. Nobody was saying how many buildings they own, how many businesses they own, how much money they have in their portfolio and their bank accounts, right? In the end of the day, sometimes we need certain realistic wake-up calls to see that life is short. Let's focus on the things that matter. Let's not be a nation of show-offs, right? Because I tell you, when Rav Aaron Kotler writes something, the Tosefta Menachos has a very fascinating thing. It writes over there, the reason the second Beis HaMikdash was destroyed is because Chemdas Mamon and Sinas Chinam. Not just Sinas Chinam. So Rav Aaron explains, this is a steer to Yuma, Daf Yud, that says it was because of Sinas Chinam. Why does the Tosefta and then the Menachos say the reason why Hashem destroyed the second temple is because of their obsession with luxury, and they were jealous of each other, of each other's materialistic houses and different belongings. So Rav Aaron says something that's a genius, really such a Sefasayim Yishak Meshiv Devarim Nechochim. The main architect of Torah in America should say such a thing, is like a Navi is talking. He said, what brought them to Sinas Chinam was the jealousy. They were so obsessed with the latest and greatest. So if one of their friends had something, a nicer house, a nicer watch, a nicer wife, a nicer, right? Shaitel, which is another disaster, then what would when people become jealous of each other, they hate each other for no reason. It says in Kabbalah, the Marchu says that. It's brought down in Arizal. What are people crazy, hating each other? What are they, narcissistic mental cases? No. But what causes them to become jealous of each other? Their obsession with luxury, right? If they weren't into the luxury, right? If everybody's standard and modest, then there's nothing to be jealous of. But you feel, because everybody has this Yetzirah that I have the latest and greatest thing, right? But when your friend ups you, then what do? You start feeling what? Animosity. And that's what destroyed the second temple, and that's what's unfortunately destroying our community right now, causing intermarriage, because a poor Jewish boy goes to ask an innocent, pure Jewish boy that has a very good job, goes to try to build a house with a Jewish woman, and instead of conducting research whether he's a Ben Torah and a mensch and frum, the vast majority of our traditional and even sometimes religious Jews, everything is money, money, money. Everything is a dollar sign, right? So let's just do the last two chapters, two paragraphs, and finish up this chapter of the Mesilat Yesharim. Sometimes it's good to go on a hike and be alone, you know. Rav Nachman of Breslov talks about this a lot. Hitbonenut is, you know, introspection. Take sometimes 5-10 minutes a day in a deserted place. Turn off your cell phone. Turn off any distraction. Talk to yourself. Who am I? What am I doing with my life? Am I getting closer to God day by day? Or am I just getting deeper into this fog of excessive luxury and excessive, gashmios? David HaMelech talks about this in Tehillim 55. He says, "Mi yiten le'ever kayona ine archik noded." And he says, sometimes David HaMelech says, my heart wants to be like a pigeon, like a yona, a dove, that goes to the far off corners of the world. Some people, every month, they have too much money. They're on a different cruise and a different vacation, especially when they retire early. Some people travel around the entire world, but they don't travel inside their heart. To know the first sentence of the Mesilat Yesharim, which my Rebbe, the Talmud of the Chazon Ish, Harav Ben David, said, Yesod ha'avoda v'shorish. What's the first line of the Mesilat Yesharim? This is something that he said you should say after Modeh Ani every day when you look in the mirror. He says, Yesod ha'chasidus, the foundation of piousness, v'shorish ha'avoda, and the foundation of a perfect servant of a game is to ask yourself, why am I here in this world? What is my obligation in this world? Is my obligation to buy cars I'm never going to drive, go shopping every Sunday or on Amazon or on online? Like one of my good friends, I was visiting him last Friday, he said, it's a disaster. He said, it's so sad that so many of the Persian women, their main WhatsApp groups is not sharing Divrei Torah or even how to make challah. It's like, there's a sale in Neiman Marcus. This is how, their only obsession is like, who has the fanciest purse? But that's how Hashem created you? Hashem gave you a neshama.
All that for the Louis Vuitton purse.
All of the, people are and that's why sometimes nature is a very holy place. Everybody knows I love waterfalls. Shout out to the Kohanim brothers on that one. And sometimes when you go deep into seclusion, and it's you and God, you need to come to the reality that it's very, very important to know why you're here. And if you're going off the derech, you're not, which doesn't mean literally off the derech, you're not from anymore, but are you doing what's your chavasa ba'olamo while you were created, or are you just playing games the whole day? And he says a lot of times the Chachamim, the Grazal, you see, went on galut. He went away from his social circle, to become more humble. And and sometimes he says, especially now, we live in such a corrupt society. It's so, sometimes it is good to go somewhere where you have no cell phone service, and you could see the beautiful valleys and canyons and mountains and waterfalls and rainbows and trees of Hashem, and realize Hashem created all this for me to be holy, to be special, to be godly and angelic, not to eat 10 times and my obsession is, I need to get 10 pairs of shoes that I'm never going to wear, 10 types of purses that I'm going to, you look at some of these houses they built, these spec houses for these richies, and their closets are bigger than most people's bedrooms. So what has their life become? It's a tragedy. It's a shame, Think about it. They've just become victims of wasting their life. But he says you have to be very vigilant and careful not to go from step 1 to step 100, which means It may take a lifetime or a year or two to work on just prishut, which means if one day you go and say, you know what, I want to be a super parsh and I'm gonna only eat salt and water and crackers every day, that's gonna cause you to go cuckoo, and you may even go after the. He says this already is Hasidut. This is very high madregot.
The first rule is to be normal.
Yeah, be normal. Go very slowly, stable. Don't go from when you skip too many steps, you fall down the staircase on the ladder. That's not what we want. And it says you're never going to be. It's short. There's no shortcuts to greatness. He says go very slowly, like a rabbit, not like a turtle versus a rabbit. He says go a little bit more, like if you want to be a parush and say maybe Sundays I won't have so much sauce. Like one thing I'm trying to do is like maybe if I'm having chicken fingers, I won't have ketchup on it. Something small like that. Baby steps. For sure, in our generation, the name of the game is baby steps. Hayom yiknek sad mimenu. He says you do a little bit today, right? You go very slowly and at baby space, right? Baby pace up the ladder of prishut and greatness until it becomes second nature. And then, I just wanted to bring out that I was learning with my great brother-in-law, the great Chacham Rabbi Yehuda, something about prishut in another book that leads to Ruach HaKodesh from the Marchu, the Arizal. And he says, how does one get to Ruach HaKodesh? Since we're on the Indian of Perishut, he says, first you have to do tremendous teshuva, be very careful to do all the positive commandments of the Torah, have extreme kavanah in your tefillah. This is his ladder. The Ramchal has his ladder to get Ruach HaKodesh. The Marchu has a different ladder. He says, learn Torah for the sake of heaven, lishma, like you're literally like Yisachar, right? Like you have the yoke of Torah, and you don't waste a second. And look what he says here. He says the fifth condition to get to Ruach HaKodesh is that you have to decrease your enjoyment of eating and what? Drinking. And waking up at midnight and going away from all the bad midot. Uprishut mikol adam. The same thing the Ramchal says. Sometimes you need to go and, do hitbodedut. So two prophets saying the same lesson. Prishut is something very crucial. Sometimes, going and being alone and just doing introspection. So you don't waste your time and say sicha b'tela. You know what sicha b'tela means? That's another problem for another time. Sometimes people, they just, their whole day they're on Facebook and YouTube, and we have to write a whole new Shulchan Aruch and Mesilat Yesharim for the problems of our generation. Smartphones make a lot of people very silly. Hashem should help everybody to always be b'simcha and become holy. And holiness is abstinence. Abstinence is holiness. Amen.